Ukrainians have just invaded a part of Russia. They're occupying a part of the Kursk province that was supposed to be a red line. It wasn't. Almost every red line that we imagine Putin has set, because we're the ones who describe them, not him, has been broken. He's not using nuclear weapons. It's time to let that fear go.
The diplomatic tension between Russia and the UK is increasing. Russia's accused 6 British diplomats of espionage. The Foreign Office says the accusation is completely baseless. It comes ahead of Sir Keir Starmer's meeting with Joe Biden and speculation the US and the UK could soon allow Ukraine to use British-made Storm Shadow missiles in the war against Russia. The prospect of more help for Ukraine has angered President Putin, with the Russian leader warning NATO countries they'll be at war with his country if Kyiv is granted permission. Well, joining me now is Anne Applebaum, a journalist and Pulitzer Prize winning historian and author of Autocracy, Inc. Good afternoon, Anne.
Good afternoon.
How seriously do you think we should take Vladimir Putin's saber rattling?
So I think it's important to remember that at every single turning point in this war, and especially at every time when it looks like the Ukrainians could get some kind of advantage, the Russians start talking about nuclear weapons. And they do it in order to frighten us, to spook us, to make us self-deter. And actually, it's often succeeded. In the autumn of 2022, when the Ukrainians were pushing forward, the US became very paranoid about a possible use of nuclear weapons and seems to have restrained them. And retrospectively, that was a huge mistake. And it would be a mistake to do it again. The Ukrainians have just invaded a part of Russia. They're occupying a part of the Kursk province that was supposed to be a red line. It wasn't. Almost every red line that we imagine Putin has set, because we're the ones who describe them, not him, has been broken. He's not using nuclear weapons. It's time to let that fear go.
But you know, one of these days he will end up carrying out his threat potentially, won't he? And isn't it therefore sort of foolish to downplay it? Well, tell me.
What? Well, I mean, so remember that he's not suicidal and he's not crazy. He knows there would be a huge price to pay for doing it. He knows he can't win some advantage on the battlefield by using nuclear weapons because, you know, the winds blow to the east. He has no easy way to use them. It's not a simple thing. It wouldn't win the war for him, and it might be the end of his power in Russia. I mean, it's an enormous leap. He's been warned by the Chinese not to do it. He's been told by the Indians not to do it. Those are countries that have a lot of influence now in Russia because he's very dependent on them economically and in other ways. I mean, each time they do this, it's to stop us, and it's to prevent the Ukrainians from winning.
So it's high time then that we collectively, stand up to Putin a little bit more then, in your view, which means those Storm Shadow missiles, the decision's already been made, hasn't it? But will that be a game changer, do you think, for Ukraine?
So I don't know that the decision is made. Maybe you know more than I do. I mean, I don't think at this point there's any game changer. Right. There is a, the idea that we should continue deterring ourselves, continue underfunding Ukraine, continue holding them back. That also has consequences. You know, the dragging on of the war is not without security implications. You know, the Iranians were not sending drones to Russia at the beginning of the war. The North Koreans were not sending ammunition to Russia at the beginning of the war. We are helping to create this, a worse and worse security situation by ourselves by refusing to let the Ukrainians win.
And can we see the shape of the end of the war now? Is it too early to say that? I mean, Zelensky's been talking for a few months now about planning for the end of the war.
The war is over when the Russians are ready to end it. So it is the Russians who will end the war, because it is the Russians who are continuing to push it and the Russians who are continuing to occupy foreign territory. So there is nothing to negotiate until we know that they are ready to stop fighting. And when they're stopped fighting, and when they've concluded that Ukraine is an independent country and that they will never control it, then the war will be over. And we will know when that moment happens.
I mean, it's hard to see that moment, isn't it?
Not necessarily. I mean, remember that Putin's original goal was to control all of Ukraine, to capture Kiev in 3 days, to control the rest of the country in 6 weeks, and to remove Ukraine from the map. It's been 2.5 years now. He hasn't succeeded in that. Many hundreds of thousands of Russians have been wounded and killed. Millions, billions of dollars worth of euros worth of military equipment has been destroyed. He's a lot closer to concluding Ukraine is a real country now than he was in February of 2022.
And just finally, if we falter again in the use of these missiles, where do you see Putin stopping? I mean, maybe even if Ukraine gets the missiles, this is, this is not Putin's end game, is it? What happens next, do you think?
I mean, as I said, there is a price being paid for the drawing out of the war, and it's a price that eventually we will pay part of as well. The stakes are still the same as they were at the beginning. So a conquered Ukraine means Russian troops on the border of Poland within striking distance of Germany. It means millions, tens of millions, maybe, of Ukrainian refugees in Europe, a whole new wave of problems. It means a new wave of security. The idea that Ukraine would lose and that then everything would be over is delusional. I mean, it's delusional. The situation would be much worse. So it continues to be a high stakes war, both for us, meaning the transatlantic community and really the whole democratic world. The rest of the autocratic world is watching the war, the Chinese, the Iranians, and many others. The price for dragging it out is going up, and the price for losing could be catastrophic.
Anne Applebaum, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Постріл! Есть? Постріл! Може заїхав, так. Коля, ну глянь, він не до нас паркується.